All right, everyone, we're back officially. Thank you. I want to
All
introduce.
right, everyone, we're
Oh,
back
I need to
officially. Thank you. I
close
want
this echo. Okay, I want to introduce our guest, Chester LeBron and Natasha Walden Robinson. Um, we are going to be discussing cybersecurity and corporate risk and liability. So, Chester, let's start with Natasha and let ladies go first with respect to introductions. So, Natasha, if you just tell us, a little bit about yourself, your current role and responsibility.
Sure. I am first and foremost the Charlotte chapter president of Blacks in Technology, which I'm really proud about. And also, I am a technology attorney. So I work for a company called Splunk Inc., and we provide a host of solutions to enterprises and individuals in the data analytics and security space. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Natasha. Chester?
Yeah, so my name's Chester LeBron. I am a senior cybersecurity engineer, specifically on the threat detection and response side. Um, I've been at Northwestern Mutual for 4 years, just about. So our team handles potential security incidents and also are responsible for building detections.
Okay. All right, great. And the conversation that I want to have today with you both is really just around the risk that corporations take on with respect to cybersecurity and what that looks like, from the inside looking out. A lot of times we'll hear news reports or, receive a notification in an email that there's been a breach in what it really means for the corporation, looking at it from that perspective. And I know that there's a lot that goes into risk mitigation around cybersecurity for all companies, including government. Yet issues still persist, to put it mildly. There are a lot of folks who just aren't up to where they should be with respect to protecting themselves against cyber threats. So, with that, let me just ask you a little bit about your roles and what you guys are tasked to do. And I'll start with Chester on this one. What is your primary job responsibility?
Yeah, so funny that you mentioned those notifications. So our team specifically would be one of the first teams to respond, right? So like if you get a notification that someone believes that there's an incident, breach is a funny where we stay away from that unless we can confirm it ourselves,
Sure.
because that implies legal responsibility. So our team would investigate using relevant log sources and either confirm or um, you know, figure out that it's a false positive, so it's not really what we believe it to be. That's our core responsibility, and then we work with different stakeholders when necessary, so that whether it be application team, legal if needed, privacy, whoever the case. So yeah, that's our main responsibility, and as I mentioned, on the other side of that, we're responsible for building detections, but we can dive into that a little later.
Yeah, no, I definitely will. And Natasha, what's your day to day consist of?
Sure. So as the product lawyer at Splunk, I collaborate with my cybersecurity legal colleagues when we need to come up with a response, and we will collaborate with other teams in the business, like Chester's team, or others, to figure out what the response is going to be if we have um, experienced an incident. And a lot of my work involves not only understanding what the incident is, but the scope of the impact. So I want to know how many customers or partners may experience some kind of negative impact as a result of an incident. I also understand the technical solutions we have available to what I say stop the bleed, or to get close to remediation or fixing the issue as soon as possible. So a lot of my work hinges on having a plan of attack, so to speak, no pun intended, but a plan as a company on how we're going to deal with that on a technical side. And from a legal standpoint, we want to be able to fix whatever's going on right away, so that our customers, are getting what they negotiated for in their contracts from us, which is reliable software that works, that gives them what they need and doesn't create any issues for their business. So that's a lot of what my work is. And communication is very key. So not only in response to the incident, but beforehand, having a communication plan and protocols in place with the different teams internally is very important, so that when something does happen, we know who to talk to and when and how to leverage all our internal resources to address an issue.
Yeah, yeah. And in my previous role, semantics and wording were very important to how we communicated out to customers. So I noticed like Chester jumped on breach real quick and was like, hey, wait, no, there's a specific way that we define a breach. And Natasha mentioned incidents. There's, incidents, and then there are hacks, and there's, risk, and these words are charged and have different meanings for different people. So what are the protocols internally for you when you believe that an incident has reached a level of a breach, and at what point is the company obligated to communicate out to the customer base that there is a problem?
Natasha, I think if you begin to start. Yeah.
Right. So depending on the level of severity, may or may not invoke our obligation under a breach notification law. So there are security breach notification laws in all 50 states as well as abroad that we are tasked with as a company with complying with. And so a lot of the assessment on the legal side is to assess if, again, we need to do any particular steps per those laws. If a breach in fact has occurred. So that's something that we analyze and look at. And then the other thing is, if it is very severe, it's all hands on deck, right? We have, a cloud security team or product security team. We have multiple groups that we can leverage internally to figure out what exactly we need to do next. And then in some cases, not at Splunk so far, but in my prior roles, we may have to engage the FBI to help with some of the investigation and how to handle, dealing with a particular hacker, so to speak. I remember there was a case where this individual just wanted a T-shirt. They just wanted something as a badge to show that they were able to hack into this particular company I was working for system. But we still had to address the negotiation with that hacker very seriously. There's some other hackers who actually do want money and substantial amounts of money in exchange for stopping, their intrusion. So it really depends on who you're dealing with, and our response will match accordingly.
Gotcha. And Chester?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of that is similar. I would say we leave breached for our legal team to put the stamp on. Our team would never use that word, and we try to stay away from that. So specifically, as I mentioned, we are responsible for investigating potential security incidents, potential being the key word. So like a lot of things that get raised to us are events that happen, event being something that happened. Sometimes it has security context, sometimes it doesn't. But when we have enough evidence to say that, yes, something happened on a system or with a user's account, and we have enough evidence, we kind of just supply that to our stakeholders, like legal, privacy, and then they make that call, which would inform whether or not we have to make a notification out to customers based on, your industry. You would have varying timelines of when that needs to occur. But yeah, so for us, it's all about just gathering evidence. And sometimes you're not able to make a definitive statement saying that something did happen. It's about what you can prove via evidence, which for us is like logs.
So. Yeah. And I'm sure you go through, plenty of logs. I'm not sure. Do you guys use Splunk at Northwestern Mutual?
We are Splunk shop. Love the product in comparison to other SIMs, so I'm sure Natasha's glad to hear that.
Absolutely. So, and not to get too in the weeds, but with respect to what you look for potential incidents, are you looking for any specific things abnormal in logs, or open ports or things like that? What do you typically identify as, okay, this is something we need to dig into a little bit more?
Right. I think that all starts with understanding your environment. So if this is something like on your laptop, right, as a normal user, is it normal for you to be reaching out to, I don't know, a Tor, like using a Tor uh, browser, right? Like, is that normal for you as a user?
Yeah,
Should you be should you be routing your traffic through there?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And for those who don't know, Tor is a browser that anonymizes yourself, so you can use it on the dark web and other places. But go ahead.
Right. So like as you as a an employee of said company, is that normal for you? Maybe you work on a team that has a specific use case. All right, that'd be something to note, right? But it all starts with like the context and understanding what is normal for any given situation, really. That's what makes our job probably the most exciting is you have to know so much about so many different things, including different OSs, Mac, Windows, Linux, you name it. So it starts there, understanding what's normal, because that informs what is abnormal. As soon as something is abnormal, that immediately intrigues us, right? So that becomes your lead, right? So if you in that example don't normally use Tor browsers, that would be something to start. Like, did you launch it yourself? Was it launched by something else? And then you start pulling on those threads, and then that normally leads to other things to investigate, so on and so forth. So that's kind of how it starts. Um, and where it ends, we don't know. But as I mentioned, you don't want to make any statements that you can't support via evidence. Ever.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So to pivot to Natasha, and incidentally, I know that Natasha is not visible. She has some video issues, so she's a disembodied voice at this point. So we get the knowledge, we just don't get to see her lovely face. So Natasha, with respect to the legal aspects, once legal does identify something as a potential breach, what is your current protocol? Who do you communicate with? Does it go all the way up to the CEO? Is it something that's handled, at a lower level? Just tell us a little bit about what raises to the level of public communication.
Right. Yeah. So it depends on the impact. So we definitely assess the impact. And it also depends on the type of threat or incident. So, you may have a network intrusion or ransomware, or it could be actually an employee error. There was one time where an employee on the engineering side just did something that screwed everything else up, for lack of a better word. And when we dug down to it, we were able to save a step because we were preparing for an external communication to customers of a certain nature that was much scarier. But then when we assessed and found out that it was an employee error, we quickly scaled back and revised that customer communication. So we still did one to explain to them why there was a loss of functionality or an issue. But it wasn't to the scale of reaching the CEO and again engaging the FBI. So it really depends on what it is. But generally speaking, as the lawyer in the room, like that's what you're doing. You're assessing what the damage is, so to speak, what the impact is, and then you are talking to, you're definitely going to escalate it up to the chief legal officer, general counsel. These types of things keep them up at night at any tech company, any major company. They're going to want to know if the network is insecure or there's a threat of any type to the company on a cyber level. So you always engage them. And then depending on, again, what the type of threat or incident is, we'll assess whether we need to include other parties externally. Of course, internally, like I said, we're always collaborating with our specialized cybersecurity council, as well as the security teams that, handle threat detection and monitoring on a daily basis, and just talking through what we need to do, again, to communicate about the issue externally. But yeah, and then again, like I mentioned, if there is enough evidence, we'll assess whether there has been a level of breach that would require that we make a specific type of communication to customers. So it really is a judgment call. It depends, which is a typical
Okay. Yeah, no, I was expecting an it depends, frankly. Yeah. But what I will ask is, are there any, I guess, federal regulations that says, if it's X, Y, and Z, then we have to communicate to the public that their information has been, made available to, someone who is unauthorized. And I'm thinking of recent, hacks, that you see online. I don't want to name specific companies, but companies who have their PII, their personal identifying information of their customers, mined or repurposed, outside of the organization. Is that at that point something that most companies have to disclose, or is it still company to company as they see fit scenario?
So it depends on the location, and that will dictate, if there's, let's say in the US, a state-specific law we need to comply with, or a broad federal, or even federal in the US. So as a cybersecurity lawyer in the US, I'll just focus on that because it's just easier than to try to talk about every other country. But we have, on the federal level, you have to have an understanding of the requirements of the Electronic Communication Privacy Act, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the Stored Communications Act, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, and then any communications from the Federal Trade Commission, as well as state-specific data breach notification laws. So I'm in North Carolina. So for example, in North Carolina, the statute there is very specific about what the security breach is. So if I can read it verbatim, they define it as an incident or unauthorized access to and acquisition of unencrypted and unredacted records or data containing personal information where illegal use of that personal information has occurred or is reasonably likely to occur. And it creates a material risk of harm to a consumer. And any incident that happens of that nature that obtains any other type of confidential process or information is still considered a breach. So very specific definition there. And so as the lawyer, you're trying to assess whether what has happened fits into that definition. So that triggers that law. And the law will then go on to say, okay, what is the obligation as the company? You have to provide notice to affected person that there has been a breach. And as you have to go through a discovery process, gather all, as Chester was saying, gather all the relevant data and evidence. So you're sure when you're making that communication that it's clear to them what's going on. There has to be an attorney general notification too. So in the state of North Carolina, you do need to notify them that this has happened, and you have notified the affected person. You may also have to notify the consumer reporting agencies, because as you know, this could impact their credit if certain financial data or personal data related to their credit has been compromised. And then any other third party who may have a need to know that this has occurred, you do need to notify them, and you have to do it within, they don't specify specific days, but without unreasonable delay. That's the standard.
Unreasonable delay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
So this is state to state. So that's just North Carolina. So it's possible that every state could have their own variation of what you just read.
Correct. Yes, there are 50 state data breach notification laws. So we at Splunk have a small army of lawyers who we kind of break out who's going to take which region, because it would just be impossible for one person to master all of those.
Now, and I'm sorry to stick on you, Nash, but this is very intriguing to me. So I'm going to dig in a little bit more. As far as the breach, is it where the data resides, or if the customer is impacted in a specific state? So, for example, if the data center is in California, but the person impacted is in North Carolina, how does that work? And then let's throw in another layer of complexity. What if it's a cloud environment? Say you have data in AWS and Azure cloud. Then what?
Dennis asking all the good questions.
Yes, these are all relevant. So where you do business is where the law would apply. But you're right. You do also want to, on the technical part of this remediation, we call it, or solution, want to assess all those things you're saying, like where are the servers, where is the data? Give me a data flow. I'll actually ask the team to map out where everything is for me. But from a legal standpoint, from a legal remediation, it's where you do business that triggers which laws you may be subject to and would have to comply with. So it's you have a task on the technical side as well as on the legal side to really fix things. You're looking at everything.
So can I follow up question? Is it where you do business or where you're headquartered? Because those are two different things.
Right. So where it's all of the above.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can be pulled into suit, again, wherever you're doing business, both US and abroad. So it gets very complicated as to when these things happen, because each statute also provides for what the damages are, right? So what the person who's been impacted on the consumer side mostly can sue you for. And so that may vary depending on the law and the location as well.
Yeah. And, if as a consumer, is my recourse to sue an organization if, somebody, used my information? How do I know that they received my information because of, a hack? Everybody, I'm assuming, personally that, everybody who needs my social security number has it, and, there's no anonymity. It's all out there. I just kind of gave up on, that level of privacy a long time ago. But if somebody, says, okay, X company, sends me a notification that my information may have been, compromised, and I should change my passwords, and, let them know they'll cover the, any, cost that might I have to incur for, credit review or, credit monitoring. I've received a couple of those throughout my, life. And, I always just say, okay, yeah, whatever. And just kind of put it aside. But is there anything that I could do? I mean, could I sue if somebody, puts a credit card in my name, or, what have you? What is the recourse?
Right. So each statute or law will say what is the quote unquote, or should say, private right of action. So an individual who feels like they've been harmed as a result of the company or other entity breaching this law can institute or file their own civil complaint against the entity. Or the Attorney General could, on your behalf in some instances, initiate a civil or criminal suit. It really depends on the facts of the case and what the law provides as we call remedies, or again, private rights of action to a consumer.
So just thinking about devil's advocate, if you're somebody in that position and you want to sue a company, just something to think about. How positive are you that this breach was the reason? Because that's kind of hard to prove, right? Like if you went to I don't know, Pastebin or whatever, there's a lot of places where this stuff gets posted, right? Whether it be credentials or your social or whatever. There's a lot of places that this stuff gets posted, and just because X was the most recent, right? Like, I don't know. I don't think the burden of proof is all that high when it comes to civil suits as opposed to like, legal suits. But yeah, are you really positive that this is the breach that caused it? And if so, I hope you have the data to prove
I was going to
that.
say, it seems like it would be a lot easier for a company to defend than for a consumer to, win in a case like that, unless it's like a class action suit and they're just going to give everybody a little bit. But yeah, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because I know there's a couple other things I want to discuss. But I know it was mentioned earlier that, ransomware, cyber attacks occur. Have you guys, either of you, been in, I guess, in a personal situation or, through your work experience, in a ransomware scenario where, somebody was, demanding a fee and you had to, either provide information or, work on the process to either determine to pay or not pay? And, kind of what does that look like?
I did tangentially, and in fact, ransomware tends to be one of the more common cyber attacks we're seeing today, especially against large companies, as well as schools and businesses where hackers know there's a lot of sensitive information, right? If you think about a college or university and how many student profiles they're seeing every day, right? And very specific information they're getting. Obviously, any retail businesses that are getting financial data, we're seeing a lot of these ransomware attacks because what the criminal is trying to do is to, like you said, extort money really from the victim. And yeah, I was tangentially involved in a case like that in a prior role, and I said, I took the position like, why are we even negotiating with this person? And if we do, we're setting a bad precedent, right? That maybe they can say, oh, we got this much money out of them. And who knows, they may share that on the dark web and somebody else may try to hit us up. But at the end of the day, the person wasn't going away. And we just felt like it was going on too long and we needed to do something. And so in that case, we did end up, I don't want to say settling, but we came to a number. It wasn't in the millions, but it was sizable enough. And the person luckily went away. But there was always the risk that they could come back or it wasn't enough. And they did actually sign an agreement that this would settle it. So that helped. But the actual process of negotiating with them took several months and required a lot of fees for us as a company to hire specialized lawyers from law firms to help guide us in that negotiation because we didn't have that expertise in-house ourselves. So that was another expense, attorney's fees, as well as the actual fees. And we didn't plan for this, right? So, every company obviously has a budget. And while we do have some money budgeted for incidents or threats or issues, you just never know how much you're going to have to come out of pocket. And so that I remember being a lot of the concern as well as where is this money coming from to fight this thing.
Yeah, interesting. And I don't know. To me, do companies have money just sitting around for contingencies like ransomware, or should they?
So hopefully they have like cybersecurity insurance. But even we're seeing that some companies, some cybersecurity insurance companies don't necessarily want to pay in some cases. But I think that would be probably if you're in a situation where you don't have that money allotted for maybe your smaller shop or medium shop and you don't have it, or you would, let's say, be run out of business in one of those cases, I think that would probably be your best course of action. For me, I haven't been in a confirmed ransomware case in my past. I've worked cases where if the malware got far enough, we believe, based on threat intelligence, that they would have dropped ransomware. And I've also been in a few cases where we've gotten ransom notes, which we had to, as I mentioned, you have to like go through and confirm and do all this stuff to investigate to see like, okay, are we actually compromised? But I think in those cases, the whole decision on do you pay or not, like if you pay, are you certain that they're not going to, or that they're going to do what they say and unencrypt your data? I think that's a legitimate question you have to ask, because for me, the answer is no, you don't know that for certain. And I don't think anybody does. But the other piece is if you are someone that, like, say you're a larger cybersecurity company and you find yourself in that situation, I just want to put this out there. The cost that it takes to pay that, if you're going to pay that, just know that whatever that cost is, it costs, far less to do some basic things that will prevent you from getting compromised in the first place, right? Like, so if you're willing to pay, let's say, $5 million, there's probably a lot of things you could do, because the cost that it takes you to even go through a whole ransomware investigation and everything that Natasha just described, I promise you that's way more expensive than what they ended up paying, right? So like if that's your assumed cost, right? I'm sure if you took like a third or maybe even a tenth of that, there's some very significant security improvements that you can make. But companies don't tend to do that unless something happens. There's a saying, don't let an incident go to waste, right? And a lot of that is for improving your security posture. So just something to think about personally.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And it's like any insurance, right? I mean, people are gonna, there's some people who believe in, having the best insurance and they're gonna, be protected. And some people are gonna roll the dice and they'll just pay price when, when an accident happens. And, I guess it's just human nature, just like in business, I guess. So, with respect to, your role and your experience, Chester, I guess, what have you seen as some of the things that people could do to, mitigate against risk? You mentioned, some preventative measures, and I'd say people. I'm talking corporations, businesses, that have cybersecurity staff. What can they do, or what are some, best practices that you've employed in, risk detection and mitigation?
Yeah, and I'd say there's a lot of data out there publicly available for free, that you can like look at. Like, Verizon has a cybersecurity report, DFIR report. There's a lot of companies that release these on like, all right, so we're seeing ransomware uptick. Natasha mentioned it as one of the more prevalent things today, than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. Simple things like just password hygiene and MFA, right? Like if you're still on 8 characters, right, you're either gonna get hit up sooner or later, right? But MFA, like, just enabling that for like your users, especially like privileged users. I believe that's one of the highest percentage of techniques that are used by adversaries. Things open on the internet, right? Like do you have servers on the internet that don't need to be there, right? Like I think Confluence recently was in the news, right? Like, do you need a Confluence server on the internet? Probably not, right? So like, if there's certain things like that, staying up with patching, right, regularly. So like, there's certainly easy thing. I don't want to call updating easy because you need to test it, and there's a whole bunch of things like that. And some passwords for service accounts are harder to change, but there's some things that you can do to improve, that will more than likely prevent you from being in one of these cases, right? Because from ransomware, it's usually something that's on the internet with a weak password and it's not protected at all. It wasn't updated in the last 5 years, just simple stuff. So that's what I've seen. And if you can do some of those things, then you'll be in a lot better shape. I see somebody posted business email compromise 100%. That also goes along with the MFA, right? Just if you don't have MFA and somebody can go to your mail or Outlook client on the web and just get a password that they've seen from a different breach, right? Password reuse. That you're right in that situation too.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of futures, but is there any protection against, supercomputers or, quantum computers? I mean, I just feel like it's hopeless. Sometimes I think about it. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me there's hope.
Yeah, I think as long as humans are the ones building those things, there's going to be a need for cybersecurity and around AI, machine learning, and stuff like that, because we're not going to be able to build something that's just perfect, right? So there's always going to be flaws in it. Will AI, machine learning, and stuff like that make our jobs harder? I think eventually, yeah. If you watch any movie and see how that rolls out, yeah, it usually doesn't work out for us. But I think I think if you can create those things to help, for example, improve, your posture, right? Like if you have, AI that can, sweep your environment and understand like, oh yeah, you have all these holes, right? There's a lot of tools that can do that, but like they have their
Well,
limitations. But if you can have those things improve, your security posture, and then also making sure those things are regularly tested, to make sure that like the system itself, like the AI itself, doesn't have gaping security holes. I think there's hope. I'm usually like an optimistic person, so.
Natasha?
yeah, I was just whispering in, licensed Splunk, we definitely have solutions like that. And they help with threat detection monitoring and just organizing like your operational workflow, because some security teams may not know where to start or what's the most efficient way to go about handling these things. And so like our software has some pre-populated run books that can give guidance or helps teams with how to approach and deal with these things and to manage it on a day-to-day basis. because the software is already out there for hackers to use as well. They're using machine learning and AI to, scour the internet and do what they need to do to find new potential targets. But yes, there's definitely a software market where we can help. So like Splunk has security solutions for the investigation and forensic side, for the SIM, we call it, or security information and event management and analytics side, and then automation and orchestration, because as we know, humans can't be in multiple places at one time. So having a level of automation helps free up time for humans, for people to do the decision-making piece, as opposed to some of the routine, and then kind of like, letting the automation handle the routine functions and tasks of the team. So just a plug there for Splunk again.
Yeah, no, actually, it's funny because I think you answered one of the questions in the chat. Anthony was asking, what security software and applications offerings would be best for threat detection. And I want to kind of take that question a little bit further because, we have a lot of folks who are either startups or, working in small businesses. What can a small business do to protect itself? And what are the tools? Are Splunk tools overkill? Are there other tools that could be used? What are your thoughts? It's for both of you.
I think it's a combination of things. I think the first thing to do is to hire a cybersecurity professional to come in and to do an assessment of your posture and where you are today and see where you have gaps. And so there are definitely folks out there who can do that for you. And yes, it's an investment, but it's worthwhile because, you never know when something like this can occur. And I find that, especially in my work, dealing with some startups, they are reluctant to invest heavily in IT infrastructure. And this kind of rolls into that and security. And I always encourage them, I was like, yes, you've taken a good step to have a lawyer and accountant, but you should also have someone looking at this stuff for you too and helping you manage this, as most companies are e-commerce companies nowadays, right? Everyone's doing things online. And so if you don't have an understanding of encryption or firewalling, or as Tessa was mentioning, multi-factor authentication, or having a secure email setup, you're just leaving the door open. So that's the one thing I say is have someone help you with doing an assessment, prioritize which risks you want to address, make sure you're backing up your systems and keeping them up to date. That's also very important in maintaining security, and restricting access wherever you can. Not everyone has a need to know or access to all of your systems, and sharing your passwords with whomever without really thinking through that is also another thing I see people doing all the time. And again, firewalling, getting antivirus software, those are available to you and relatively inexpensive nowadays. And just educating yourself, staying up to date on what's going on in trends can help a lot too. And I'll finally say too, if you do have employees, you should be training them or educating them or quizzing them on a semi-regular basis. We see a lot of issues in the corporate level with employees who don't recognize phishing scams, and so we've invested a lot of time into doing annual training so that employees know to look at the sender, of the email, or to look at, does this look like it's legit? Are they asking me for information they should already have? Is this really my bank? Is this someone outside who really has a need to know this information? Who really questioning when they get emails, because we get so many emails nowadays, and oftentimes that's an in for some of these bad actors.
Natasha had an absolutely stellar answer, and there's not a ton to add to that. But I will say, if the earlier you can do everything that Natasha just mentioned, the better, because it costs far more to go back and fix things that are already in place than it does to just build as you go, right? That left to right model. So like, if you can, have good password hygiene from the beginning, if you could have a regular documented patching cycle and all these things, 100% better. I would say if you can have somebody that is a developer that can either build or automate some of the easier things that you shouldn't need to deal with, I think the better. There's a lot of tools out there, depending on what we're talking about, that you can help. Like, for example, if you are interested in understanding, right, if I was an attacker, like which accounts can I hit up to get to right? Domain admin, right? Bloodhound is a tool that's available. You can go and you can run that in your environment, do it in tests first, and then run it in your environment. You can kind of see, okay, so if I were to get compromised, they would go from me to this account to this account to this account, and then you can start to figure out why, and then address the specific issues. If you're in the cloud, right? We were talking about AI. If we'll speak AWS specifically, guard duty, enabling that right from the jump is going to help you, because it by design, we were just talking about machine learning and stuff like that, and Splunk has their own version of this. Identifying what is abnormal for a specific user or application, whatever, that goes a long way. There's going to be a ton of false positives, but then again, if you have that developer and someone that has some security background, they can kind of understand, all right, this is normal for within context for this specific thing, and it's a false positive. But then this thing over here, like, should this instance be running a Bitcoin miner? Probably not, right? So like, there's things that are available to you. I could spout off, I think we're kind of at time, I could spout off some other ideas, and if people want to reach out like for a specific use case, I literally have thousands of bookmarks for like things like this. So yeah, just hit me up. But like, there's a lot of free tools that you can use to speed up. Like, GitHub is free, open source for a reason. If you literally just do type in what you're looking for and then add in the domain GitHub, you're probably gonna find it. Better, whether it works for you and it's supported, not sure, but it's there.
No, it's funny. Chester, you remind me of that Chappelle Show skit where Dave was Tyrone Biggum's. He was kids in the classroom where to go find drugs. That's the kind of the feeling I got when you were saying some of those tools and what they could do. But yeah, this has been great. We are at time. I do sincerely appreciate you both for taking time out of your busy schedules. If anybody wants to get additional questions to either Natasha or Chester, you can reach out to me, send me a direct message. Chester just dropped his LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me if need be, and I can make sure I get the questions directly to the folks who need them. With that, I'll thank you guys. Chester, I'm sure you got plenty of detection to do, so I'll let you get back to your real and not that you don't have any work to do, Natasha. I'm sure you have stuff too.
Of course. Thank you both. It's been a fun day.
All right. Thanks, guys. And we'll continue on. The next session coming up for everyone is going to be maintaining mental health of the Black tech worker. And we have icon Wayne Sutton, who's going to talk to us about that. That's going to be a great session coming up in a few minutes. So see you back here in a couple. All right. Bye, everyone.